Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I'm going to predict some mechanics for the upcoming Abyssos Savage. I've done the normal modes a bunch, I've looked for all the little details of ways they could make us use the arena or new attacks the boss might have, and I just want to make a video covering those things. I did it for the first raid tier this expansion, and I don't normally get to do it for the second or third, so while it's a little bit late, it's already Sunday, and the raid comes out Tuesday, I figured I might as well make this just so we can have a bit of a discussion for the next couple of days while we're waiting for this tier to be released. So I'm going to do all of the fights in one video instead of doing a video per fight like I did before. I'm just going to stick to mostly high level stuff and things that I feel really confident about instead of just throwing a bunch of darts at a dartboard like I did last time. So with that, let's get started. All right, let's start with our predictions for P5S and we'll work our way through all of them. So this one, I always have to temper myself. The first fight always seems like they could do a lot more with it, but whether it's the first, second, or third tier, they don't normally do that much that's new. They usually just make things a lot stricter from the stuff that we see in normal mode. That being said, I do think there's a significant portion of the encounter missing in P5S that isn't in normal that we're going to see in Savage. First of all, I suspect Savage will actually start us on the poison arena. I don't think they're going to cutscene us in the fight. I don't think we're going to have to do that transition every time. I'm fairly confident they'll start us in the poison pit down at the bottom. Now, the first big thing I expect the boss to actually do is gain one more set of skills, emerald skills. The boss exhibits ruby attacks and topaz attacks, and unless the poison puddles are maybe supposed to be representative of emerald attacks, it's entirely possible. I suspect we'll see emerald, whatever, there's ruby howl, topaz gems, and maybe it'll be, I don't know, emerald quartz. That's the dumbest thing anyone's ever said, but you know what I mean. They'll get some emerald skills. One thing that isn't prevalent at all is knockbacks, and I really thought we'd see a knockback in normal mode, especially with the walls being gone. There's almost always some kind of knockback. So maybe the emerald skills will be knockback skills. I mean, emerald is normally wind-based, so that wouldn't be that out of the realm of possibilities. Knockback skills from knockbacks coming from emerald skills. Now, one big thing I expect to happen is the boss to use physical attacks as well as magical attacks. In normal mode, he does Searing Ray and he does the Topaz Stones, and those reflect off of the barrier that Carbuncle puts up. Very thematic, of course. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Carbuncle also use physical skills to try and switch up the player, and then also introduce barriers that are physical barriers. They'd have to be significantly different in appearance to make sure that they don't, I guess, kind of mesh together. And they may not do this just for that reason. Or if they do it, they might just only have the reflected barriers, and the idea of a physical attack going through the barrier might just be the singular thing that you have to factor in. I think they could do a lot if they introduce a new physical barrier, and that's why I have to be kind of tempered about it, because again, they don't normally go that overboard. And with that, they might actually do sort of back and forth mechanics. You know how Searing Ray is basically just a frontal AoE, and then when it's in the sector, it becomes that reflected AoE and it hits half the room. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a front and back Searing Ray, so you might have to start like outside of the barrier, then inside of the barrier, or behind Carbuncle and then in front of Carbuncle, depending on the part of the fight, while doing other sorts of positioning, split damage AoEs or spreads or something like that. You can almost always with Savage make a mechanic much harder by just adding spreads or splits during the mechanic, and they do that a lot, so I do think that's going to happen constantly throughout the fight. Now, much stricter area for a lot of the mechanics in general. That's a normal thing for Savage, so everything we see in normal mode, but handled in a stricter manner. There's one part where in normal mode you're kind of tucked in a corner, and I suspect that they could do split damage AoEs there. They could do a tank buster. There could be some sort of attack that comes from the center of the room that hits each of those little pizza slice looking areas. All of those things I think are entirely possible to make use of that smaller space. And those 8 pizza slices in general, I know they're used for the barriers, but I don't think, and I'm calling the reflex barriers, by the way, just because it's, I don't know, just is easier for me. I don't think they all get used in normal mode. So it could just be that the barriers themselves, even if there are only reflex, end up being more I don't know, strict. Actually, I do think they use all of them. They just very rarely use more than, I guess, 2 of those lines at a time. So just better use of those pizza slices, the individual slices, maybe even 4 barriers at once and then a topaz stone in each. You have to go all the way around. That's definitely going to happen. There's definitely going to be one where there's 8 different sectors that are reflected, and there's going to be like topaz stones that like drop in certain orders, and you're going to have to identify the first one that's safe, the last one that's safe, but it's going to be like, I don't know, I think it's going to be a lot stricter again that than we see in normal mode. A really basic one I actually kind of skipped over, Toxic Crunch, I think will be a tank swap. I also think the tank that gets Toxic Crunched is going to explode a la Raven's Beak. I think that's how they're going to force the tank swap in general. They could just do a damage down, but I don't know. I feel like if they want to handle the space, this seems like the kind of fight to make an exploding tank buster. So you have to make use of those tighter spaces a lot more efficiently. So I think that's probably the better option. And honestly, there are a ton more things I could throw at this. Obviously, some people think there's going to be obsidian or diamond carbuncle mechanics. I honestly don't think they're going to go that crazy. I think what I've suggested is kind of the extent of it. It's just going to be much more strict. I will say this, the jumping bites, I don't think those are going to be a one-time thing. And I don't think they're going to be absent in Savage either. Those could be baited on players. Those could be like Hippocampus's jumps, for example. And I mean, they could also be like baited on tanks, or they could just happen at the same time as other mechanics. I think they're going to use those jumping crunches a lot more. But I think they're just going to have it kill you, because I don't think they want to maybe mess up the timeline of the fight by doing the spit animation, unless they're going to account for that if you do avoid it, which is entirely possible. But I do think the jumping crunch attack is going to be back, and it's going to be used more effectively. All right, that's it for P5S. I don't think it's going to be that bad. I think it'll get cleared pretty quickly. But P6, I actually think I'm most afraid of from a... People have a hard time understanding how a type of mechanic works. So P6S, lots of area control with those danger panels. I think there's going to be a much, much stricter way of handling almost everything in this fight. Even the normal mode was pretty impressive, in my opinion. They actually make really, really tight use of a lot of the space, especially towards the back end of the polyominoids that you have to deal with, polyominoid Sigma 3, 4, and 5. I was surprised to see it, be as strict as it was, and I think it's going to be even stricter than that in Savage. I think the most obvious thing for me to predict is another transmission virus coming from the spider leg looking claw thing on Hegemony's back. I think this will work like the Shadowkeeper clones, the ones that do the half-room AoE on whichever side the virus sprouts from. So I think the virus will sprout either left or right, and you'll have to pay attention to which side of your back the spider leg is on, and then it'll do a 180-degree AoE in that direction. So I suspect it'll be handled much the same way, but we'll be handling those while needing to find safe panels, while needing to have the group very tightly stacked for certain mechanics. So it also should inflict a bleed if it hits people. The only attack we see from that spider leg in normal is a light conal AoE from Strofixo. And when that hits you, it does a bleed. So I guess this would do a bleed, but in Savage, it'll probably just kill you. It's just if you were to survive, maybe it would give you a bleed. Who knows? Now, the panel swapping is the biggest thing. I don't just think they're going to make the panel swapping have far fewer safe spots after they swap, so you really have to find the one safe panel to do a lot of things. But I also think they're going to swap multiple times. So you're going to have ones that slide over one, do a mechanic, slide over again, do another mechanic, like a full clockwise rotation of them, or even like a counterclockwise or across the room swaps. I think it's just going to be like, they're going to mark them like 1, 2, 3, 4, like when they're going to swap. Oh my goodness, that would be crazy if all 4 of them were swapped, or all 4 of them were tethered, but it would have like a 1, 2, 3, or 4 to designate which swap is going to happen in what order. So maybe when 1 expires, 1 set swap. And then when 2 expires, that set swaps. But then the 2 could connect to the one that was adjusted from the 1 instead of just connecting to the one it was originally. There's a lot of ways they could do this, and this is why I think this is going to be a really big struggle for a lot of people. Honestly, I don't even think they need to add or change that much else with how, I guess, decent the normal mode was. They are going to, but I don't think they need to. I also think there's going to be some mechanics that prevent players from standing on the same panels. If it were just a spread AoE, that wouldn't be enough, in my opinion. I think it's going to be more like Titan stuff, where if you're on a panel and anyone else is on that panel, you both hit each other no matter what. I just think that you can, unless they make the spreads massive, in which case it would achieve the same thing. I just think that unless that is the case, that it's just, you're going to squeeze a bunch of people on one platform. And it's possible they want you to do that too. Maybe there's 2 safe platforms and you have splits or spreads and you got to go 4-4 each or something in that realm. All of that's possible. As soon as you throw spreads and splits into the equation, a lot more becomes possible. We know they're going to use them. There's no way they don't. They're even in normal mode. So definitely going to happen. But other than that, I actually think it's going to be very close to normal mode. It's just going to be way harder. I think it's going to be even closer to normal mode than P5S, weirdly enough. But it's just going to be much, much harder than I think the PF is ready for. I think it's going to be that one that you don't want to do every week. Then we got P7. I don't think I can even predict half the things. I think this is going to have so many new things, brand new mechanics, brand new layouts, that it's just not reasonable to predict. That's just how they've done third tiers up till now. A lot of stuff you see in normal, but then like a crazy amount of stuff that you're like, what the heck is this even? That you have to learn completely from scratch, no matter how prepared you were. That being said, I think there's some obvious things they're going to do in Savage. The most obvious one is there is an unused sapling. You can see a mouth sapling hovering around the boss. And so that's either, I think, a conal AoE or a donut. If it's a conal, I think it's more interesting because it would probably aim through the rest of the room and then cut off it would cut off most of the area that you have. It would cut off all the pathways. It would cut off about 2/3 of the circles on the other side. Depending on the size of the cone, it could completely cut them off. And then you'd have just behind it on the platform it's actually on. That's, of course, just one possibility. The donut, if there was a donut, I don't know. I don't think that would be as cool because that kind of forces you onto a platform. Or they have to make the donut not big enough to reach the other side of the room. So you need some people in the donut and some people not in the donut. I don't think a donut's as interesting here. They could also just do tethers. I mean, there could be a sapling that tethers to people, needs to be baited in some way, and you have to drag them across. I wouldn't even be surprised if the birds work that way. If the birds all tether to like the farthest player, so you have to bait them to make sure that they don't hit other people during certain mechanics. But the trailer seems to suggest that the birds will be the same. We do actually see what appears to be a Savage mechanic in the trailer. We see birds during the meteors, and there's 8 meteors. That never happens in normal mode. So I think that's also just a Savage mechanic that we got an actual peek at. Another thing I suspect is Bow of Abyssos is going to combo in a few more ways. I think the name of the skill or the animation is going to be changed to indicate when he does that near slam and then he punches. Instead of giving you arrows and you react to it, you're probably going to have to know before they even slam which way you need to be moving or which way you need to have moved in order to avoid them outright. For the one where he slams all the way forward, I suspect he's actually going to pull his arms back through the arena, directly through the center, almost like the near raid, I suppose. And then you'll have to have people split on both sides of that for spreads or splits. I just think that's, again, those spreads or splits into it, and this is always what happens. You can pretty easily figure out a couple more things. I also think he might chain them together where maybe he does a punch and then he pulls the arm back through the middle. Or he slams immediately again with the other hand before doing that. So I wouldn't be surprised. I think Bow of Abyssos is going to be like the most basic thing that gets adjusted. I also think they're going to do some new types of tank busters. I think they'll do a buster on each tank still, but I also think they'll do a split damage AoE on the rest of the party. I wouldn't even be surprised to see an Akmorn style 3-3-2 split where the 2 tanks stack and then the 2 groups of 3 stack somewhere else. I think with the 3 platforms, it just kind of reminds me of DSR in that sense. It gives me flashbacks to that little formation you do in the final phase. So I wouldn't be surprised for that. All the platforms being separated, I think we all kind of expect that. You'll need the right players on each in order to deal with an ad or to deal with the mechanic that's coming up. I also wouldn't be surprised to see conals coming from the boss. So you need 8 spread spots around the boss's like center point, which is like across the entire arena at that point. Protean waves for the party from that point. I also wouldn't be surprised to see another new sapling other than the mouth that maybe spawns in the center and does something similar. To spawns when the platform is triangle based to do something different. And then also the arena maybe not just having the 2 formations, maybe having one in the front and 2 in the back for the triangle, or just a whole new layout altogether. There's so many possibilities with this fight that it's kind of exciting. So I I just think every nightmare that you could have is going to happen in this fight, but it'll still be better than Phoenix, so you won't mind. Again, I think P6S is going to be the one people don't like pugging every week, and I think this one's going to turn out okay. And I rarely feel that way because they have a horrible track record with the second raid tier's third encounter. Most of the time, it's not great, so I hope they don't continue that curse here. And as for P8S, it's honestly almost pointless to predict because we're almost certainly seeing either a door boss or a second boss style situation. I think it's a door boss, just based on the mechanics, based on the cadence. It feels like it's a door boss, like it's actually half a boss and not just because there's going to be more stuff in Savage. Now, the most obvious indicator that there's either a second phase or, you know, a second boss even is our Orchestrion. In our Orchestrion, there's a music sheet that is exclusively from Savage, which means we're getting new music, which is really exciting. I think it's called White Stone Black. I didn't write it down, so I think that's what it's called off the top of my head. So yeah, I think it's a full-blown door boss. As for what the boss could do even in this phase that's like this, I think he's going to transform into some more things. In normal mode, we get the Gorgon, we get the Hippocampus, and then we get, I guess, Shackled form, the base form, whatever you want to call that. But there's so many things they could pull from the other Hematheos. I mean, every boss that we've had up to this point, even Hesperos' Hematheos could be, I guess, used as a mechanic here. Just nothing safe. Anything from the first 7 bosses, they could appear in some way here. So be ready for any of it. Not all of it, but any of it. As for everything else that the boss is going to do, I think it's going to be a lot of much tighter line AoEs. The arena is gridded out in a very specific way, and some of the stuff that's gridded there isn't actually used. For example, the dragon AoE only goes north to south in normal mode, but you can see on the ground it has lines for east to west. So be ready for east to west dragon AoEs. I think during the puddles with Chthonic Vent, I think instead of just dragons, there might be a phoenix or 2 phoenixes diving into puddles for donut AoEs as well, which would mean you probably have to split the group, or if there's only one, maybe you just have to find the singular safe spot and you don't have that much time to do it. I also think the volcanic torches will do longitudinal and latitudinal torches at the same time. So one's coming from either east or west and north or south at the same time, and then they intersect to limit the safe spots on the arena considerably. I think there's going to be stricter use of spread AoEs here, especially because of those lines on the arena. If you look at the white lines and the black lines, I think they're going to use those inner spaces between the black and white lines on the ground to make really, really tight safe spots for either... I think there's going to be 4 group of 2 splits, and you're going to have this really tiny spot on the corner that's, you know, inside the inside white lines, but it's also kind of between 2 of the black lines. It's tough. It's a tight spot. But then also I think you could fit 8 people across the inner tiles between the white and the black lines as well. So I think they're going to make tighter use of that. Tank swap. I also think maybe a tank block. The attack, the tank buster here, the Viper attack, it kind of looks like it should be one tank blocking for the other. They've used this marker for not just that. We saw that in the near raid, it was just a regular tank buster symbol. But I wouldn't be surprised if they use it here as a blocking AoE, like one tank has to step in front of the other tank because they're going to take a double hit and they need to reduce the damage. I guess a la Cloud of Darkness when you don't tank and vuln it. Let's be honest, people are probably going to tank and vuln this regardless, so I guess it doesn't really matter. I think the Gorgon Petrifies are going to be staggered, and I think they're going to happen alongside more mechanics. And I think we'll see the Gorgon stuff appear even during other phases. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he transforms into the Hippocampus and the Gorgon at the same time, knockbacks plus petrifies, or maybe does his normal phase stuff, his shackled phase stuff while the Gorgons are out. I think we should expect the Gorgons and the petrifies to happen a lot throughout this fight. I also wouldn't be surprised to see transmission from P6 be one of the Hematheo skills it borrows, and infecting people with Gorgons with the zombified AoEs as well. The Hippocampus knockbacks, I think, will be just less telegraphed, or you'll need to be knocked in a very specific way. Having Sephiroth Unreal makes me think of the punching phase where you have to get knocked in order to avoid the growing puddles. And that kind of thing wouldn't be surprising here either, in my opinion. So yeah, multiple forms at once, entire second boss phase, and I don't even think I'm scratching the surface with this. I think this is going to be a really busy, really crazy and hectic second fight. I just hope that it's either a short door boss and a long second boss, which is with my luck's not going to happen, or it's all one fight. I kind of don't want this whole 8-minute door boss into 8-minute second boss thing. It's okay, but it's not a format I'm a fan of. I prefer something more like X-Death, where you have a 4 to 4.5 minute first phase, and then when you beat the door boss, you get a 12-minute second phase on the boss. So you really feel like you've earned it. You really feel like you've pushed it. But given the way Stormblood was designed, where the second half of the fight was basically a repeat of the first, it might have made that kind of boss more logical to do. And with the way that they're doing these, where everything is really a new mechanic, maybe it repeats, but it could have a different pattern altogether. I'm not confident. That's all I want to say there. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun tier. I loved all the bosses on normal mode. Even the most boring of them, I would love to do more. And so I'm hoping they translate well to Savage. We at least don't have Super Orange. I was a little PTSD'd by the last fight having a Phoenix, but I think it'll be okay. I'm feeling optimistic about this one. Anyway, let me know what you think about these encounters and what kind of Savage mechanics you expect. Be sure to let me know in the comment section of the video below. And with that, I'm done. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. Stay tuned for our kill VODs and our guides this week, and I will see you then. Until then, take care.